everyone, and welcome to the Burgess podcast, the show where we are opening up conversations about life at sea, discussing hot topics within the industry, as well as offering mental health support and promoting well-being for crew. We also have our very own in-house recruitment team, so if you or anyone you know is currently looking for a new position, please send your updated CV to recruitment@burgessyachts.com or check out our recruitment posts on Instagram @Burgess Yacht Crew. We are really thrilled today to be joined by the iconic Captain Kelly Gordon. She really needs very little introduction as she is so well known within the industry. A captain, a mentor, and a social media influencer, she is passionate about promoting mental health well-being and inspiring future generations of crew to join the industry. Hi, Captain Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm great. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just, I'm super excited and honored to just be here with this podcast today.
Well, we're delighted to have you with us. So we read your article that you wrote for DocWalk, How to Handle Witnessing Racism. And yeah, we just felt like we had to talk to you about this. So what inspired you to write that article?
Actually, an incident happened on board my own vessel. And it was kind of ironic that somebody wrote in with that question. It's something that I was just like, you know what? I have to most definitely respond to this one.
So we did a podcast with Gabriella Barragan last year where we discussed the differences between race, culture and ethnicity. So I think a good next step is to dive in a little deeper about how to deal with racism when we experience it or see it. And I'd like to look at this from the perspective of the victim, the witness, but also the HOD or captain. So Burgess has a zero tolerance policy when it comes to racism, and as I'm sure that most other yacht management companies are the same. So what should a crew member do if they feel like they are being discriminated against?
You know, I think that crew have a responsibility to stand up for themselves and to protect themselves. So I encourage my crew to respectfully and politely address the issue. If they feel comfortable at first, I feel that they have a responsibility and they have a right to speak up and say, you know, hey man, that's not cool. That's offensive to me, and address it as such. And hopefully the other person says, oh, I'm sorry, I totally didn't mean it that way. Because look, you know, vessels are a melting pot, right? We have so many different races, ethnicities, backgrounds, cultures. So it's bound to happen that somebody says something that they don't even know is offensive, or maybe it's a little bit of what they think is banter. And you know, we always have this back and forth on the boats, and maybe it went one step too far. So as a crew member, say to that person, hey, that's not cool. Here's how I perceive that. And hopefully it should stop from there. But let's say you're somebody that you don't feel comfortable saying something to that person. Go to your HOD or go to your captain and talk to them about it, and they'll address it. You know, they'll speak to that person. And I know myself personally, you know, I would approach it the same way as I expect my crew to just be like, hey, you know, what was up with this comment? And just kind of let the conversation flow from there. And then I've had other instances, and a lot of times it's a mistake. They didn't realize that they were being offensive. They thought that they were playing. They didn't realize, you know, that whatever they said was particularly derogatory based on that person's cultural attributes.
Absolutely. And I think it is important to remember that there may be occasions when an offending comment is unintentional. And when we spoke with Gabriella last year, we talked about evolving terminology. You know, words change, terminology changes, and how mistakes can happen. But we just need to listen and learn from each other. And ultimately, you know, acknowledge our mistake, apologize for our mistake, and just show respect to our colleagues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And be sensitive to the fact that not only do we have so many different races and ethnicities and cultural backgrounds, but we have so many different upbringings as well. You know, values, manners, morals that we bring along with us just from how we were raised. And so you have to stop and think for a minute. This might be offensive to that person. I'm not just joking around with my brother or sister that gets my joke. But unfortunately, sometimes these things aren't accidents, and sometimes they're intentional, and they're mean, and they're hurtful. And I think that in that instance, your HOD or your captain needs to really step in and just say, like you're saying, I have a zero tolerance policy for this, no more. And if it happens anymore, you're gone. Because that's just a whole host of other things if a crew member is doing something intentionally hurtful.
Yeah.
That's just not somebody that you want around. That's not somebody you want on board. It's just going to create such a toxic environment. And so I am with you, the zero tolerance policy,
Yeah. Yeah. It's not tolerated, and behavior of that kind is just not accepted on board a yacht, because it, like you said, it creates a really toxic environment for everyone else as well. It's the victim, obviously, but the people who witness it are affected by how it upsets the victim, and that kind of person on board. It just creates a really uncomfortable atmosphere for everyone else on board.
Oh, it does. You can feel it, especially someone for like myself. I thrive off of the energy in a room, and the thought of having to walk through my boat on eggshells or just feeling that energy, it just totally sets you up for a bad day, bad week, and a bad month. It's you just can't have that.
No. So, just going back to the individual who feels that they are struggling with discrimination, the options are talking to somebody you trust on board, like you said, so the captain or the HOD, but they can go externally. So there is, for example, the yacht management company, the DPA, the ISWAN helpline that they can go to for more confidential advice on next steps.
Yeah, no, and these are great resources, especially if you have, a management company or you have that DPA, and for whatever reason, if you feel better going to them, or there's a couple of different scenarios here how this could play out. Let's say that particular crew member that's being derogatory towards you is buddies with the captain. You're not gonna right there immediately. You're not gonna feel comfortable going to the captain.
Yeah,
or. I mean, what's your relationship with your HOD? Maybe the relationship there is not the best. So there could be a couple of reasons just straight away that you don't feel comfortable going to somebody on the inside of the boat. And maybe you just need somebody to talk to, how to process or whatever. ISWAN's amazing. They have a 24/7 hotline. I know there's a couple other agencies out there that have paid programs, MSOS, MedAir. So your boat may even have something already in place for you so that you can make a phone call and try to address this.
Yeah. I think the important message is don't struggle alone. Don't suffer in silence. There are a whole pool of people for you to talk to, whether you need somebody on board or whether you need something more confidential, as in a helpline or yacht management company. There is always someone to talk to. And also, if you don't want to make a formal complaint using the onboard complaints procedure or talk to anyone on board, by talking confidentially to the DPA, the matter could be dealt with in a more subtle way, such as onboard training.
Yeah. Sometimes we're reactive instead of proactive, and you'd like to think that we get to that stuff before it ever happens. But the truth of the matter is sometimes it doesn't. So let's say that person takes it to the DPA. Then what the DPA could then do is go, okay, obviously there's a little bit of an issue on this vessel. Maybe we need to have a quick little class or a quick little meeting, just reminding everybody of what the policies are, and then doing that as a group. That kind of gets us a soft, subtle way of getting your message out there of like, hey guys, this isn't right. And that person who has made the offense is probably going to pick up on it and go, okay, I need to get myself in check here. So so onboard training, proactively or reactively, is definitely going to help.
Yeah, it's reminding everyone what is and isn't acceptable.
And I think it's important to explain too that this doesn't just affect the victim. It can affect who has to watch this happen, especially if it happens day after day after day. And sometimes, like I said, those little comments that are just poked in throughout the day that happen over time really start to chip away. And they're not just chipping away at the victim, they're chipping away at everybody else that's seeing it and hearing it. And you also don't know if that's not triggering something that they've experienced in the past. So is that unearthing a former instance that they had with maybe the very same thing or something similar? So that's a really good point. It's not just the victim that's being affected here. And I know that I've personally, I hate to admit, but I've had a bully on board under my command. And that person is no longer here. But it did. It would affect you. And it affected me. Just the energy on board the boat. And it's amazing how much it does so. And after that person was let go, and we all, the rest of the crew, talked about, wow, the energy, the vibe, the comfort on the boat just totally changes. And that's actually something that I was thinking about the other day, is just how much it affects the whole entire boat.
Which brings us on nicely to the captain. You know, what advice can you give to captains on how to handle cases of racism on board a yacht?
React sooner than what you think you should. That's something that I recently learned about myself, is I don't like to give up on my crew at all, ever. And I think I took too long to finally dismiss that crew member. So if I had anything to say to other captains, other department heads, move quicker on things like this, because they get out of hand really fast. And I think in some instances, depending on the character of that person or their upbringing, talking to them 3, 4, 5 times is not going to change anything. Now, I know you have onboard policies. It could be 0 tolerance. It could be 3 strikes, you're out. But my big thing is move quicker on something like this than you think you should. And look, I get it. As captains, we have a million irons in the fire, a million other things that we're trying to take care of. Not that any one thing gets more attention or less attention, but it can build up really fast, you know, and before you know it, you have a bigger, more toxic issue on hand than what you realize. Something that you think might be a small, innocent comment, and it may be, you need to address it. Because they usually spiral. They usually grow a little bit bigger.
One word that gets, and I think we talked about it earlier, is banter. The word banter.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, it's used very lightheartedly. You know, there is always banter. But I think from a captain's point of view and a HOD's point of view, it's very easy to use the word banter as a reason for bullying, harassment. It was unintentional, it was just banter. But we cannot confuse racism with banter. You know, discrimination is not acceptable. It doesn't matter whether it's meant as a joke or not. It's important to raise that awareness that we cannot use banter as a reason for discrimination.
You got to be careful with banter. You really got to know your crew members, and you really, if you think maybe you shouldn't say it, then don't say it. I think a lot of times, sometimes things can be hurtful. You know, you just got to be so careful with the banter. But then again, nip it in the bud right away, even as a crew member. If you're joking and playing throughout the day and somebody says something, then just say, hey man, that hurts. And hopefully the other person's going to go, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it that way. Da, 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 da. And then you learn, you know, yeah. I mean, you're a big family, right? You got to learn what are each other's buttons, you know, but we're potentially a huge family, right? On some boats. So you got to be mindful. And here's the thing too, that I say to my crew members is, guys, don't forget that this is a place of work. I think for some reason in the yachting industry, sometimes I sit back and I go, would that ever happen in a 9 to 5? Would that ever happen in an office? And I'm like, no, it wouldn't. So if it can't happen there, what makes you think it should happen here? And so sometimes I think we need to remind ourselves, even though we work in the same place that we live, that we eat, that we sleep, it is still work. And there are certain do's and don'ts of a work environment. So it can get blurred easily.
And I think a word that you mentioned earlier is a very important word, is trigger. We don't know each other's stories. We don't know our histories. So what could start off as what you would consider innocent banter is actually triggering somebody's mental health from an incident that happened a few years ago that was really traumatic. You've just got to be sensitive, haven't you? Sensitive to other people's stories and lives, and not be disrespectful.
No, absolutely. You need to be aware of what you're saying and how you're behaving, because it can hurt others, especially since we're such a big melting pot on vessels.
So in terms of advice to captains in dealing with a case of racism, obviously there's the disciplinary procedure on board that can be instigated, and serious cases, of course, can be grounds for gross misconduct. But is training, is that something that can be looked at, that captains can look to organising training on board the boat as a way of handling what could potentially be racism on board? Early doors, if he sees a couple of what we called earlier as banter, and she is worried about this potentially escalating, is that something that they can look to as a way of dealing with it?
Yeah, and look, training can be done in a couple of different ways. You can have the formal training of a formal class, or you can have little more subtle reminders throughout the year along the way. I know a lot of times I'll send my HODs videos on anything leadership. It could be how to have difficult conversations. It could be on sexual harassment. It could be on racism. It could be on bullying. And I continually study and read articles, watch YouTube videos. So when I find good ones, I forward them on, sometimes to my HODs, sometimes to the whole boat. And even if they only listen to half of it, that's fine. They got something. So you can have training in a myriad of ways. You can have formal training. You can have informal by just sharing resources, or we sit down and we have discussions a lot. We sit down and eat at the table together almost every day. And we certainly meet after a charter and discuss what we could have done differently this, that, or the other. Or, when I have crew members on that maybe are a little bit green on deck and we needed to rehash a maneuver after we've done it. So there's so many different ways that you can offer training, if you will, on board.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons we started these podcasts, to talk about diversity, because it is something that isn't really talked about very much in the industry. And we are, I think it's okay to acknowledge that we are two white people talking about a topic that we don't suffer from. So I can only learn, it's up to me to self-educate, to read, to learn from other people's stories about how this affects them and what I can do better. So I agree. I think training it needs to be bigger. It needs to be there needs to be more of it. And learning from each other, talking about culture on board a boat. The culture is so important, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And I think encouraging management companies, captains, whoever it is that's doing the hiring, I think encouraging them to seek out diversity. I intentionally try to seek out diversity as much as I can and make my boat diverse.
And do you think that diversity is part of what makes you such a great team?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. It'd be kind of boring if it was just, it'd be boring. You would never learn anything. You wouldn't ever see different points of view or different ways of doing things or perceiving things. You learn so much more when you're a more diverse crew.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Support from the yacht management company is also a key point, to remind captains that the yacht management company is there to support them in if they're having these issues, in terms of helping them to handle it, arrange training, etc.
But I want to ask you a question. What do you do when, let's say, the yacht management company and the captain have been buddy-buddy for 20 years? And let's say the issue is with the captain. Who does the crew member go to? That's an interesting one if you think about it. Who do you go to then if all you have is the captain, the management company, and the owner? How do you deal with that?
I mean, it's never an easy step to make, but you do have the DPA, you do have, like at Burgess, you have the crew team, so the Burgess Fleet Crew Manager, for example. We have mental health first aiders, or also you have helplines like is one who you can go to and get that advice. There's always someone, and I think that's such an important message for crew who are struggling to know who to talk to. There is always somebody.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked you that question, because then it shows you're not stuck. There are still other people that you can go to, but then you're responsible for your own mental and physical health. If the vessel's not right for you, there's a bunch more out there. Yeah. I say to crew members, not every seat fits every butt. So if that vessel doesn't work for you, at some point, it's okay to say this isn't for me. This isn't the environment that I want to be in. I'm moving on.
Yeah.
Do you find that is okay too?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sometimes as a team, the team doesn't bond. But again, I would, from a point of discrimination of any description, we would always deal with it seriously. We would always take any complaint seriously and deal with it. So please never be afraid to talk to us or talk to a helpline, a seafarer helpline, or because at the end of the day, that situation needs to be dealt with. That person needs to be told that is not acceptable. It's not tolerated, because you can't have somebody like that on board a boat or anywhere talking to people like that without dealing with it.
And I want to go back to something, how you said, there's always somebody to go to. And this reminds me of an instance. I was at a marina over in the Bahamas. A young woman reached out to me on Instagram and said, "Hey, I see you're over here in this particular marina. I am too. Can I come over and talk to you?" And I was like, absolutely. I thought she just wanted to meet me. I knew that she was in the deck department, so I thought, okay, maybe she's got some questions about, getting to captaincy or whatever. She come over and she was like, I just don't know where to go. And she was being bullied by her captain. And so she saw my presence on social media. She sent me a message and said, "Can I come talk to you?" You can even do that. You can talk to other crew members. You can reach out to other captains for help. There's always somewhere you can go. So even if your captain and your management have been buddies for years, there's always somebody that you can talk to. There's somebody else, like you said, within the management company. And sometimes the situation could maybe just be something where you need someone else to talk to. You need another perspective.
And I think, we're very keen to communicate that to crew, build those networks on various topics, whether it's mental health, diversity. There are so many groups and people out there like yourself who are there to help, who have the experience and the knowledge to offer guidance, to offer support. And it's just building those networks for crew so that they know who they can go to when they're in a moment of struggle. And I think we can't really finish this chat without talking about, we touched on it earlier, but the impact all of this has on everyone's mental health on board the boat.
Yes. As I said earlier, it affects the whole entire boat.
The victim, the witnesses, the captain.
The rest of the crew. Yep, it does.
So what support is available to crew who are struggling with mental health?
So that's a really good question. As we've mentioned it several times, ISWAN is available. Corinne Rayson at the Crew Coach is amazing. Emma at Seize the Mind is a great resource. There's your management company that's likely got resources within it. So there's actually a lot more out there than you might think. If you're on a Coast Guard vessel, a U.S. flagged vessel, I know they recently launched a new app. Granted, it's for sexual harassment, but if you were to experience something like that, and you're on a U.S. flag vessel, you can report it. As you mentioned earlier, there's the flag state that you can go to, and be aware of what your own vessel has to offer. Do they have a subscription for mental health through MSOS or MedAir? So there's not enough out there, but there's still a fair bit out there that if you need to reach out, there's definitely someone that you can talk to.
And is it getting better? You say that it's not a lot out there, but is it growing?
It's growing. It's growing. It's getting better. More and more people are bringing awareness to just how important the mental health of seafarers are. And I think that it can only go up from here, just because you see it now. You've got the people out there that, like I just mentioned, Seize the Mind, the Ice One, the crew coach, myself, I'm holding a mental health seminar at the Palm Beach Boat Show, that are trying to get it out there and to make this change and to say, hey, we have a responsibility to take care of ourselves and our other crew members' mental health. We need more specialized training. We need more of the training, and it's getting better. It is.
I think the whole conversation is just getting people talking, isn't it? It's rid ourselves of this shame that we have when it comes to mental health, and to open up the conversations of why, for example, our conversation today about racism, what is it, why is it wrong, to remind people of ultimately treating each other with kindness, with respect, learn from each other, listen to each other, and support each other. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kelly. It's been a really insightful chat, and hopefully we can all work together and build these discussions on just being mindful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here and so glad to share what I could. So it's just been an absolute pleasure to be here.